30,000 feet above Nazi Germany. The P-51 Mustang shudders violently as cannon fire tears through the fuselage. Oil sprays across the windscreen, turning the world black. The temperature gauge makes into the red zone. The pilot, a 20-year-old farm boy from West Virginia named Charles Chuck Yeager, is 400 miles deep into enemy territory alone, with 5 Messerschmitts closing in for the kill. His fuel tank reads half empty. Enough to limp home, maybe. Every ounce of training, every survival instinct tells him, turn west, run for England, pray the engine holds together, but below him, a crippled Beeson bomber is dying. 9 American boys inside, desperately fighting off German fighters. In 30 seconds, they'll all be dead. Chuck Yeager looks at his oil pressure gauge, looks at the burning bomber, and makes a choice that will defund the rest of his life. He pushes the throttle forward, the Merlin engine screams, and the Messerschmitts never see him coming. This is the story of an airplane that the U.S. Army Air Force called a failure, an airplane they almost canceled, an airplane designed by a German Jewish refugee who fled the Nazis with nothing but blueprints and dreams. The fighter that changed the war, the plane that Hitler couldn't stop, the aircraft that proved innovation matters more than raw power. This is the untold story of the P-51 Mustang. January 11th, the world is burning in the spring of 1940. France has fallen in 6 weeks. The British Army barely escaped annihilation at Dunkirk. The Luftwaffe owns the skies over Europe. Every night, German bombers pound London into rubble. Winston Churchill stands in the ruins of Parliament and knows a terrible truth. Britain is losing the air war. The Royal Air Force is bleeding to death. Spitfires and Hurricanes are being shot down faster than British factories can build them. Churchill sends a desperate telegram across the Atlantic Ocean. We need fighters, hundreds of them, now. The British Purchasing Commission arrives in America with briefcases full of cash and a simple request. They visit Curtiss, Republic, Lockheed, every major aircraft manufacturer, but the factories are already running at maximum capacity. Production lines are full. There are no fighters to spare. Then someone suggests a small company in California, North American Aviation. They build training planes, simple, cheap, reliable. Nothing glamorous, but maybe they have spare capacity. Maybe they can build Curtiss P-40 fighters under license. It's worth asking. The British delegation arrives at North American's factory in Inglewood, California on a hot April morning. They meet with the company president, a hard-nosed engineer named James Dutch Kindleberger. They spread out blueprints of the P-40 on his desk. "Can you build these?" they ask. Dutch studies the drawings for exactly 30 seconds. Then he looks up and says something that makes the British think he's either a genius or insane. "This design is obsolete. Give us 120 days and we'll design you something better. Design a completely new fighter aircraft from scratch? In 4 months? Impossible. It takes 2 years to design a fighter, 3 years to get it into production. But Dutch Kindleberger has a secret. His name is Edgar Schmude. Edgar Schmude was born in Germany in 1880. He grew up in Bavaria, fell in love with aviation, studied engineering. By the 1920s, he was designing aircraft for German companies. He watched the Nazis rise to power. He watched them burn books in the streets. He watched them pass laws stripping Jews of citizenship, property, life. Edgar's mother was Jewish. That made Edgar Jewish under Nazi law. In 1930, before the worst began, Edgar fled to America with his wife, his young son, and a leather portfolio stuffed with aircraft designs. He spoke broken English. He had $37 in his pocket, and he had a dream to build the perfect fighter plane. For 12 years, Edgar worked at North American Aviation, designing trainers, sketching fighters in his spare time, waiting for his chance. Now, finally, Dutch Kindleberger is giving him that chance. 120 days to design the fighter he's been dreaming about since he was a boy in Bavaria. The fighter that will destroy the regime that drove him from his homeland. Edgar barely sleeps for the next 4 months. He works 18-hour days, 7 days a week. His design is revolutionary. While other engineers use traditional wings, Edgar chooses something radical, a laminar flow wing, an experimental NASA concept. The wing is shaped so perfectly that air flows over it with almost no turbulence. Less turbulence means less drag. Less drag means more speed. But speed isn't enough. Edgar tackles the problem that plagues every fighter designer, the cooling system. Piston engines need radiators, but radiators create drag. They slow the airplane down. It's a fundamental compromise, unless you're clever enough to turn a disadvantage into an advantage. Edgar designs an air scoop beneath the fuselage shaped like an airfoil. Incoming air cools the radiator, yes, but as it heats up, it expands and shoots out the back, creating thrust. The radiator doesn't slow the airplane down. It actually speeds it up. It's called the Meredith effect. Engineers will use this principle in jet fighters for the next 80 years. In exactly 117 days, 3 days ahead of schedule, the first prototype rolls out of the factory, October 40. They call it the Mustang. Test pilot Vance Breese climbs into the cockpit, takes off, and lands 6 minutes later with a huge grin. "This airplane flies like it's on rails." The Mustang is fast, 390 miles per hour at low altitude. It handles beautifully. The British order 320 immediately. The U.S. Army Air Force orders 500 more. Edgar Schmood, the Jewish refugee from Bavaria, has done the impossible. Then they try to fight at high altitude, and everything falls apart. Above 15,000 feet, the Mustang's Allison engine gasps for air like a drowning man. Power drops. Speed bleeds away. The Mustang that dominated at low altitude becomes a sitting duck at 20,000 feet. German fighters, the Focke-Wulf-20, the Messerschmitt 1, operate at 25 to 30,000 feet. American bombers fly their missions at those altitudes. The Mustang can't protect them there. The Army Air Force is furious. Generals who authorized millions of dollars for this airplane watch it fail the one mission that matters. Some want to cancel the entire program. Edgar Schmood sits in his office at night, staring at drawings, wondering what went wrong. His dream fighter, the airplane that was supposed to win the war, is a failure. Across the Atlantic Ocean, a British test pilot named Ronald Harker flies a Mustang for the first time at Duxford Airfield in April 1942. Like every pilot, he's impressed by the handling, disappointed by the altitude performance. But as he walks away from the airplane, wiping sweat from his face, he has a sudden thought. Britain's most famous fighter, the Spitfire, uses the legendary Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The Merlin has a two-stage supercharger that forces massive amounts of air into the cylinders at high altitude. It's the most powerful engine in the world. What if they married the Merlin to the Mustang airframe? What if Edgar's brilliant design just needs a different heart? Within weeks, Rolls-Royce engineers are working around the clock, pulling the Allison engine out of a Mustang and bolting in a Merlin 60. It's a tight fit. They have to modify the cowling, reroute fuel lines, redesign engine mounts. October 13th, 1942. Test pilot Ronnie Shepard takes the modified Mustang into the air. He climbs to 20,000 feet, then 25,000, then 30,000. The airplane doesn't slow down. It accelerates. When Shepard lands, his hands are shaking with excitement. "Gentlemen," he tells the engineers gathered around the aircraft, "this is the best fighter in the world." But there's a problem. Britain doesn't have enough Merlin engines for its own Spitfires, let alone for American Mustangs. The solution lies across the ocean in Detroit, Michigan. The Packard Motor Company, famous for luxury automobiles, receives the license to manufacture the Merlin under the designation V1650. It's an enormous undertaking. The Merlin is the most complex aircraft engine ever built, with thousands of precision parts manufactured to tolerances of 1/1000th of an inch. Packard has to convert car factories, train workers who've never seen an aircraft engine, create entirely new tooling. But by early 1940, Merlin engines are rolling off the assembly line. American automotive workers, many of them women whose husbands and sons are fighting overseas, build engines that will protect their boys in the sky. North American aviation begins installing Packard Merlins in Mustangs. The new version, designated P-51B, makes its first flight in November 1940. The performance is breathtaking. Maximum speed 400 to 41 miles per hour. Service ceiling 42,000 feet. Rate of climb 3,600 feet per minute. It's faster than the German Focke-Wulf 20. It can outclimb the Messerschmitt 109. Unlike the heavy Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, it can outturn almost anything in the sky. By spring 1943, the first P-51Bs arrive in England. The veteran pilots of the 4th Fighter Group, men who've been flying both Thunderbolts, gather around the new aircraft with deep skepticism. They've heard the promises before. Every new fighter is supposed to be the war winner. The Mustang looks fragile, almost delicate, compared to the massive P-47. The liquid-cooled engine worries them. One bullet in the coolant system, and you're dead. The P-47's radial engine can take dozens of hits and keep running. Lieutenant Ralph "Kid" Hofer, a 21-year-old ace from Missouri, walks around the Mustang, kicks the tires, and announces to anyone who'll listen, "I'm not flying this thing. It's a coffin with wings." The group commander, Colonel Don Blakesley, makes the decision that changes everything. "Hofer," he says, "you're flying it. That's an order." On March 4th, 1944, the 4th Fighter Group flies its first mission in Mustangs. The target? Berlin. Ralph Hofer takes off, believing he might not come home. 3 hours later, he lands with tears streaming down his face. He shot down 2 Messerschmitts and damaged a third. "This airplane," he tells the crew chief, "is a gift from God." 2 months later, Kid Hofer will be shot down and killed over Romania. But In his last letter home, he writes to his mother, "I'm flying the finest fighter in the world. If I don't come back, know that I had every advantage." But the Mustang still has one critical limitation: range. Even with the Merlin engine, even with drop tanks under the wings, the P-51B can only escort bombers about 600 miles from England. Many targets in Germany are farther. Every day, American B-6 and B-24 bombers fly deep into the Reich. Every day, they fly beyond the range of their escorts. Every day, the Luftwaffe waits for the American fighters to turn back, then attacks in waves. The losses are catastrophic. October 14th in Puy, a raid on ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt. The Luftwaffe shoots down 77 bombers in a single day. 600 American airmen killed or captured in 6 hours. The bomber crews call it Black Thursday. After Schweinfurt, bomber crews start refusing to fly, not because they're cowards, because they know it's suicide. In a conference room in Washington, D.C., an engineer proposes something desperate. Put an extra fuel tank inside the Mustang's fuselage right behind the pilot's seat. 85 gallons of high-octane gasoline, unprotected, inches from the pilot's back. If a bullet hits it, the airplane will explode instantly. The extra weight behind the cockpit will make the aircraft unstable, difficult to control in combat, but it will give the Mustang enough range to fly to Berlin and back. 1,500 miles, deeper into Germany than any single-engine fighter in history. The generals approve it. They have no choice. The alternative is losing the air war. In November 1940, the first P-51Bs with the 85-gallon fuselage tank arrive in England. Bomber crews, men who have watched their friends die by the hundreds, can hardly believe it. For the first time, they won't be alone. On December 1st, Lieutenant Robert Johnson leads a flight of Mustangs escorting B-Ds to Solingen, Germany. For the first time, American fighters fly the entire mission. The bombers get through with minimal losses. In the debriefing, a Beeson pilot, a kid from Nebraska, barely old enough to drink, breaks down crying. "You stayed with us," he says to Johnson. "You actually stayed with us." March 4th, 1944. The first mission to Berlin. 800 Beeson bombers, escorted by P-50 Mustangs from the 4th Fighter Group. For the Luftwaffe, it's a shock. American fighters over the heart of the Reich? Impossible. But there they are. Captain Don Gentile shoots down 3 Messerschmitts in 12 minutes. Lieutenant Pierce McKinnon destroys 2 Focke-Wulfs. The dogfights are savage, brutal, but the bombers get through. Hermann Goering, commander of the Luftwaffe, watches the gun camera footage and tells Hitler, "We have lost the war. The Americans have fighters that can reach Berlin." From March to May in 1944, the Mustangs fly deeper and deeper. They escort bombers to Munich, Vienna, Ploesti. Wherever the bombers go, the Mustangs follow. And they don't just defend, they hunt. When the bombers turn for home, the fighters stay. They dive to treetop level and strafe German airfields, destroying fighters on the ground before they can take off. In April 1944 alone, Mustangs destroy over 1,000 German aircraft, half of them on the ground. The Luftwaffe is bleeding to death. German ace Franz Stigler, a veteran pilot who survived 3 years on the Eastern Front, writes in his diary, "The Mustang has changed everything. We used to wait for the American escorts to turn back. Now they never turn back. We used to attack from high altitude where we had the advantage. Now The Mustangs are above us, always above us. We used to land, refuel, and take off to attack the next wave. Now we can't even land safely. They are waiting for us at our own airfields. This is not war, this is slaughter. Now, let's return to Chuck Yeager, 30,000 feet above Germany, oil streaming from his damaged engine, 5 Messerschmitts hunting him. This is January 11th. Yeager is 20 years old. Before the war, he was a mechanic in Hamlin, West Virginia, a town so small it doesn't appear on most maps. His family was so poor they didn't have electricity. He joined the Army Air Force because it paid $50 a month. Now he's an officer, a fighter pilot, 400 miles behind enemy lines with a crippled airplane and a choice: run for home or fight. Below him, the beast is burning. He can see figures moving inside the shattered nose, boys from Nebraska or Texas or California, boys just like him, trying to survive. Standard procedure says turn west, save yourself. You can't help them. But Chuck Yeager never learned to follow standard procedure. He rolls the Mustang inverted and dives straight down, full throttle, even though his engine temperature is redlining, and any second the whole thing could seize and explode. The Messerschmitts don't see him until it's too late. Yeager lines up behind the trailing 109, fires a 2-second burst, watches it explode, pulls up, rolls left, fires again. Another Messerschmitt spins away, trailing smoke. 3 left. Now they know he's there. They split up. Classic Luftwaffe tactic, trying to sandwich him. 1 comes from above, 2 from the sides. Yeager does something the Germans don't expect. He pulls into a vertical climb, straight up, full throttle. The Merlin engine, even damaged, even overheating, roars like it's brand new. The German pilots try to follow. Their Messerschmitts can't keep up. They stall, fall away. Yeager rolls over at the top, dives on another 109, shoots it down. 4 German fighters destroyed in 90 seconds. The Beasant escapes. Only then does Yeager turn for home. His engine temperature is 50 degrees into the red zone. Any moment it could explode. He throttles back to minimum power, nursing the damaged Mustang across 400 miles of hostile territory, watching every gauge, listening to every sound. 2 hours later, he crosses the English coast and lands at his base. His crew chief counts 17 bullet holes in the airplane, 1 through the engine, 2 through the wing, 14 through the fuselage. "How did you survive this?" the crew chief asks. Yeager pats the airplane's nose. "I was flying a Mustang." The engineers wanted 1 more upgrade, firepower. The P-51 carries 4 50 caliber machine guns, 2 in each wing. It's adequate, but pilots want more. The solution, the P-51D model. 6 guns, 3 in each wing. The Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun is the most devastating aircraft weapon of World War II. Each gun fires 800 rounds per minute. 6 guns firing together unleash 75 bullets per second, 4,500 rounds per minute. A 1-second burst will tear the wing off a Messerschmitt, and to help the pilot aim, North American installs a bubble canopy. Clear 360-degree view. The pilot can see everything. By mid-1944, P-1D Mustangs pour off the assembly lines. 15 aircraft per day, 400 per month. Women riveters in California, workers in Detroit, farmers' daughters building wings in Texas. They know their brothers and husbands are flying these airplanes. They know every rivet, every bolt might save a life. They work with a ferocity that amazes the supervisors. Production quality is so high that Mustangs fresh from the factory fly combat missions without modification. The air war becomes a slaughter, not of Americans, of Germans. In April 1944, Mustangs destroy over 1,000 enemy aircraft. In May, another 1,000. The Luftwaffe is running out of pilots faster than they can train new ones. German teenagers with 30 hours of flight training are thrown into combat against American aces with 500 hours. It's murder. By June 1944, the day of the D-Day landings, the Luftwaffe is so weak it can barely contest the invasion. Allied bombers roam over France almost unopposed. The Mustang has won the air war. Lieutenant George Preddy of Greensboro, North Carolina, becomes the highest-scoring American ace in Europe, flying a P-51D he names Crippled. 25 confirmed kills. He writes letters home to his mother describing the dogfights in matter-of-fact language that hides the terror. The Mustang is the reason I'm alive. It's faster, climbs better, turns tighter. When I meet a German fighter, I know I have the advantage. That confidence is the difference between life and death. On Christmas Day, 1944, George Preddy will be killed by friendly fire, shot down by American anti-aircraft gunners who mistake his Mustang for a German fighter. He's 25 years old. By the end of the war, the numbers tell the story. P-51 Mustangs destroy 450 enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat, over 4,000 more on the ground. 281 Mustang pilots become aces. But the real measure of the Mustang's success isn't in kills, it's in lives saved. Before the Mustang arrived in Europe, bomber losses averaged 10% per mission. 10 out of every 100 bombers shot down. Every day. After the Mustang began flying escort, losses dropped to 2%. Tens of thousands of American bomber crewmen came home alive because of the P-15. Boys who would have died over Hamburg or Munich or Berlin instead came home, married, had children, built lives. There are people alive today, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, who exist because a Mustang protected their grandfather's bomber 75 years ago. Edgar Schmude, the Jewish refugee from Bavaria who designed the Mustang, never flew in combat. He spent the war in California, designing, improving, solving problems. When the war ended, he received the Medal of Merit, one of the highest civilian honors. The Army Air Force officer presenting the medal said, "You designed the weapon that destroyed the Luftwaffe." Edgar thought about that, about his mother, who died in Germany before the worst began, about the cousins and aunts and uncles who disappeared into camps, about the country that drove him out with nothing but blueprints and hope. "I designed an airplane," he said quietly. Brave men flew it. After the war, Chuck Yeager became the first man to break the sound barrier, flying the rocket-powered X-1. When reporters asked him what airplane he wanted to fly on that historic mission, he said, "Something as good as the Mustang." Ralph "Kid" Hofer, the pilot who called the Mustang a coffin with wings, shot down 15 German fighters before he was killed. Don Gentile survived the war with 22 kills and became a test pilot. George Preddy's P-51D Crippled is on display at the National Air and Space Museum. Every year, thousands of people stand in front of it, reading the kill markings, touching the fuselage, trying to imagine what it was like. Today, over 150 airworthy Mustangs still fly at air shows around the world. When a Mustang flies overhead, when you hear the distinctive sound of the Merlin engine, veterans in the crowd stand up. Sometimes they cry. They remember what that sound meant in 1944. It meant help was coming. It meant they weren't alone. It meant someone was looking out for them. The P-51 Mustang continued flying for decades after World War II. Korea, the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Latin American conflicts. The Dominican Republic flew Mustangs until 1984. But the Mustang's real legacy isn't in museums or air shows. It's in the lesson it teaches, that innovation matters, that engineering matters, that sometimes the difference between victory and defeat, between life and death, comes down to a better idea, a laminar wing, a supercharged engine, a cleverly designed fuel tank, the willingness to take a failed design and make it better. The Mustang was built by immigrants and refugees, by women in factories and engineers working 18-hour days, by farm boys who became aces, and by mechanics who kept the engines running. People who refused to accept that good enough was good enough. People who believed they could build something better, and they did. They built the airplane that changed the war. They built the weapon that saved thousands of lives. They built a legend that still flies. They built the P-1 Mustang,